Love and Betrayal, The Consequences of Infidelity. The central theme of this story is love and betrayal. The complex love relationship that unfolds between King Garuda, Queen Sasundi, and the musician Saga forms the backbone of the story. The depth of affection, temporary passion, and betrayal are intertwined, shaping the fate of the characters. It depicts how desire can influence people's destinies. The initial relationship between King Garuda and Queen Sasundi is passionate, but when Saga and Queen Sasundi's relationship begins, the situation becomes complicated. Throughout the story, rather than presenting a moral lesson, it depicts the fate of Queen Sasundi, who has lost her moral order. By doing so, it emphasizes the importance of affection, loyalty, and individual choice, suggesting how people should take responsibility for their actions. Long ago, on an island called Selma, there lived a clan of Garuda birds. These birds were said to eat dragons and possessed magical powers. The king of the Garuda birds would sometimes transform into a beautiful young man and visit the city of Varanasi, where he enjoyed playing dice games at King Tamba's palace. His beautiful appearance quickly became famous throughout the palace. Among King Tamba's consorts, the particularly beautiful Queen Sasundi came to the gaming area to see this young man. The young man and the queen fell deeply in love with each other from the moment they saw each other. The Garuda King, disguised as the young man, used his magical power to create a great wind that blew through the city, strong enough to topple houses. He trapped the entire city in darkness, as if ink had been spilled over it. While people couldn't see a thing,
the Garuda King embraced Queen Sasundi and flew up into the sky.
The two began a joyful life of love on Selma Island.
The Garuda King continued to visit the city with an innocent face and play with the kings.
Of course, in the city, no one knew the whereabouts of the queen.
The king could not forget the beautiful Queen Sasundi and spent his days in sadness. So the king ordered a musician named Saga to search for the queen. Search all places, both land and sea.
Saga continued his journey everywhere and walked around, but he didn't even hear rumors about the queen. One day, he boarded a ship from a village called Valukacha.
At that time, the merchants on board, seeing Saga as a musician, begged him to play the lute for them.
As the sound of the lute flowed out over the sea, something unexpected happened. The fish, intoxicated by the music, began to make a commotion in the waves, hitting the boat with their tails. Eventually, a giant Makara fish leaped and fell onto the boat. The boat was completely destroyed, and Saga clung to a piece of wood, drifting among the waves. The place Saga barely managed to reach was Selma Island, where the Garuda birds lived.
Queen Sasundi, who was walking on the beach, found Saga and ran up to him.
The two discussed with each other how they came to this island.
There's nothing to worry about. King Garuda is not here now,
the queen said.
The queen took Saga to the palace, gave him food, washed his body with perfume, and let him rest on a fine bed.
During this time, Saga fell in love with the queen.
She, who was originally irresponsible and had a fickle heart,
now hid Saga from King Garuda and began a secret life of love with Saga.
Several months passed.
One day, several merchants came to this island from the city of Varanasi in search of firewood and food.
Saga, who had been indulging in adulterous love with a guilty conscience, awakened to his mission. While leaving his heart and his life of love with the queen, he got a ride on the merchant's boat. He parted with Queen Sasundi and returned alone to the city. Upon arriving in the city, Saga went to the place where the kings were playing and sang a song while playing the lute. Selma Island, where the scent of tamira trees wafts and the sound of waves intoxicates the heart. Though the queen is far away, O king, my adulterous heart only grows more intensely painful.
The Garuda King, who was playing with the other kings, was surprised to hear this and instinctively asked Saga in song, "Saga, how did you cross the sea, find Selma Island, and how did you meet Sasundi?"
Saga sang the story of how he met the queen. The ship of merchants seeking treasure was destroyed and drifted, stranded on Selma Island. The fragrant beauty embraced me like a mother. She cared for me with food, clothing, a bed, and forbidden love. O king, I confess this without hiding anything.
Upon hearing Saga's song, the Garuda King was filled with regret and muttered to himself, "Ah, even though I lived on that remote island, I couldn't protect her. Well, no matter. I'm a bird after all. Still, humans are stupid. They ruin everything for the sake of lust. Since I had also transformed into a human, I understand that ugliness well. At this point, I don't care about such a fickle woman. She should just go back to King Tamba. I have no use for a woman who doesn't know true love because of her infidelity." He sent the queen back to King Tamba and never came to this city again.
There are several lessons that we in modern times can learn from this story. The first is to understand the consequences of our actions. The story teaches us that our actions can sometimes produce unexpected results. The reckless actions of King Garuda and Queen Sasundi had serious consequences for themselves and those around them. In modern society as well, it's important to understand that our rash decisions and actions can have long-term consequences, and to act cautiously. The second is the balance between emotion and reason. The characters in the story are often driven by passion and affection, but the results are not always positive. For us in modern times, it reminds us of the importance of maintaining a balance between emotion and reason. The third is self-reflection and growth. King Garuda's regret shows the importance of self-reflection. Acknowledging mistakes, learning from them, and growing is essential for personal development. Through self-reflection, we can make better decisions. The fourth is taking responsibility. The story teaches us that individuals should take responsibility for their choices and actions. Even in today's complex society, this principle is very important. The fifth is consideration and understanding towards others. The impact the characters in the story have on each other highlights the lack of consideration for others. It makes us recognize once again the importance of understanding and respecting the feelings and positions of others. As described above, the lessons that can be learned from this story are valid not only in our personal lives, but also in the workplace and social relationships. Understanding the management of human relationships, ethical decision-making, and responsibility for one's own actions are very valuable lessons for us living in modern society. On the other hand, there are also some points to be careful about when learning from this story. The first is the cultural and historical background. The story has a specific cultural and historical context. Therefore, when directly applying its lessons and values to the present, it is necessary to consider cultural differences and changes over time. For example, the gender roles and views on love in the story may feel outdated from a modern perspective. The second is the diversity of moral interpretations. The moral lessons of the story can be interpreted differently by different people. Some viewers may extract specific lessons from the story's characters and events, while other viewers may find different lessons. It is important to understand this subjectivity. The third is the distinction between reality and scripture. The story is a Buddhist scripture and may not fully express the complexity and diversity of reality. In real life, a more complex and multifaceted perspective may be needed rather than directly applying the lessons of the story. The fourth is the change in ethical and moral values. Ethical and moral values change with the times. Therefore, the lessons of an old story may not necessarily align with modern ethics. For example, the theme of this story, which deals with adultery and infidelity, may be evaluated differently from a modern perspective. The fifth is the comparison with personal values. The lessons from the story are influenced by the values and beliefs of the individual receiving them. It is important to judge whether the lessons of the story are meaningful to the individual by comparing them with one's own values. For example, because King Garuda is a bird, he expresses a cruel sentiment towards humans at the end. But this can be considered as a warning to humans or simply as a defamation of humans. In general, when learning from this story, it is important to pay attention to cultural and historical background, subjectivity of moral interpretation, distinction between reality and scripture, changes in ethical values, and comparison with personal values.